Okay, Nick, you want to go ahead and get us started? I have our recording going now.
Yep. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. So yeah, this is the 2023-24 continuous improvement plan. It seems like you guys have done this many times. I am Nick. I am somewhat new to this. I helped Allison last year gather the CIPs, and she trained me through certain parts of it. And it looks like I'll be possibly taking this over in the future. So I am happy to join you guys. Happy to get your questions, kind of get started on this so I can learn more. But yeah, thanks for joining.
And I think most of you probably already know me. I'm Allison Hankin. I'm the K-12 Accountability and Projects Program Manager for the board. And we are going to be transitioning really over the process of this next year for Nick to be taking over on supporting CIPs. So if you have questions, direct them to Nick first this year. And if he can't be reached, you can reach out to me, or if he has a question, he can always reach out to me. But also know that I'm still available to support you, especially with questions that are more deeply related to how you get data, how you look at data, how you set goals, what strategic planning looks like. Those types of more deep questions, those are going to be more in my wheelhouse, whereas Nick will be more focused on compliance, the templates, the process. So he's really the person to reach out to for those types of questions in particular. So today we're going to go through similar things to most years in terms of our CIP, but we do have a couple extra things that we want to touch base on. And that's just to help you to have a little bit of context about some things. So Nick, I'm going to ask you to jump off a screen share just for a sec so that I can screen share. And then we'll come back to our main presentation in just a sec. Okay, so hopefully folks can see this. One of the things that we wanted to share with you this year that's a little bit different than what we've done in the past is the executive summary of the Accountability Oversight Committee's annual report. This year, the Accountability Oversight Committee identified 4 priority recommendations that relate to the State Board of Education's current priorities for accelerated learning. So I wanted to just walk you through those really quick because they're really important. And as you're working on your continuous improvement plans, we just want you to know about some of the areas of focus that are important for our office, for the board. I'm hearing that you cannot see the shared screen. Is that everyone or is that just one person? Nick, can you see my shared screen? Okay, so some can see it and some cannot. All right, most people can see it. So it sounds like there's just maybe one person having technical difficulties. So I'll keep going. So I am going to just jump in. There were some really great positive findings when the AOC looked at 21-22 school year data and previous data, related to the pandemic. This document will be being shared out after this webinar, so you will get the chance to look at it in more detail. I'm going to spend most of my time really just walking through the 4 focus areas and the findings and priority recommendations. So in regards to early literacy, the news is mostly good. For most groups, Idaho has essentially recovered in terms of our loss of learning in terms of the pandemic. So we did see a dip in performance in the 2020-21 school year, but we have seen some recovery in 21-22. We're about 2 percentage points away from full recovery as of 21-22 when we look at all students, all grades K through 3. So in general, the picture is pretty good here. However, there were certain groups of students that were impacted more by the pandemic and who have not recovered as quickly. That is shown some in regards to cohorts in figure 1. And then in figure 2, we really look at the subgroups. And with the deeper data that's available in the full AOC report, what we see is that with most of the student subgroups, they have not recovered as well as our all students, our white group, the rest of the subgroups, for the most part, are still a little bit behind. So one of the priority recommendations that we have, the priority for K-4 literacy, is to maintain that commitment statewide to early literacy and to that initiative, which seems to be showing some success, including financial and support resources. We shouldn't let up on those, but we also encourage you, as you're doing your work, to focus on subgroups and cohorts within your own schools and districts that you have seen have been more impacted by the pandemic. The next area of focus for the board right now is middle grades math, which we're sort of generally considering to be grades 5 through 9. And we looked at a specific cohort level analysis that was actually longitudinal with a matched cohort of students who were 3rd grade through 7th grade on the ISAT. And what we see is that students stay close to the proficiency cut. Their scale scores stay close to the proficiency cut in 3rd and 4th grade in math. But after 4th grade, we begin to see a gap between the scale score that is needed to be proficient and the average scale score of students in Idaho. And this was true when we looked across multiple groups. So this was not the only cohort of students we looked at. We looked across groups, and it was very common to see students really right at that cut or very close in 4th grade, and then the diversion would start to take place. So we're really focusing on that 5-9 level. And so right now there is a middle grades math work group that's really taking a close look at this and trying to identify some recommendations for some real changes and how we can improve math achievement. But while you're waiting on that, we strongly encourage you to focus a substantial portion of your remaining ARP-ESSER funds and other resources that you have on math interventions, accelerated instruction in math, and math-related professional development. Not all of your money. We know that you have lots of freedom in terms of how you spend it, but we want to encourage you to really look at math as an area where the state feels there's a need for focus. The next area was high school graduation, and I think essentially the story here is that the graduation rates are stagnant, and that's probably not surprising to you. And so the Accountability Oversight Committee's priority recommendation related to graduation is that all LEAs, if you do not already have them, should work on establishing an early warning system to identify students that are at risk for dropping out, and then couple that with robust interventions and supports for identified students. There are really great systems nationwide that are related to early warning systems that can really catch students as early as middle school, or sometimes as early as late elementary, who seem to be showing certain indicators that make them at a higher risk for dropping out. And the earlier you intervene, the less likely they are to drop out. So if you don't have one of those early warning systems in place, we encourage you to start to look into that. Finally, the last area is chronic absenteeism. And the data there was really interesting because what we saw was that adequate attendance stayed pretty steady for K through 5 through sort of the primary pandemic year. But for both middle school and high school, it started to fall in 2020-21. And then for all groups, it continued to fall in 21 and 22. We know that some of this may be due to changes on attendance policies and policies that schools have related to students attending when they're sick. However, we still look at this as a pretty big concern because we're talking about 25% of kids who missed school for 10% or more of your attendance days. And so for us, we're really going to be focusing on the State Department and State Board working together to provide more support and resources to you to reduce absenteeism. So if you have not already started looking into Attendance Works, that is a website and whole program related to attendance that the board has looked at and is supportive of, we encourage you to start looking into that right away if you have not already. So are there any questions about this particular area of focus that the board and Accountability Oversight Committee has for this year? We just wanted to share it with you and felt like this was a good opportunity since it relates to your work. Okay, great. I don't see any questions. So Nick, you can go ahead and share your screen again, and we'll jump back over to CIPs.
Okay, is that seen?
Yeah, you can go ahead and jump to the next screen. So the really quick overview in regards to changes with the continuous improvement plans and any of the plans, right? The literacy intervention program plan, the college and career advising and mentoring plan. These are changes that happened in 21 and 22. The great news is there were no changes for the 22 that happened in 22-23. So during the 23 legislature, there were no changes, which means we have no changes for the 23-24 school year in terms of requirements. We're keeping these here just in case you need to be reminded of changes that have happened in the last few years. So just some quick basics that should not be a surprise, hopefully for any of you, unless you're brand new to developing a CIP. The continuous improvement plans are due October 1st. Every single year, October 1st, regardless of what day that falls on, because it's written into statute. It's also important to note that neither Nick or I have the ability to give you an extension because it's written into statute. And so you can reach out to us and say, can I have an extension? And we will say, sorry, we can't. If you have not yet had the opportunity to get your continuous improvement plan to your board by October 1st, you can send us a draft and then take it to your board after October 1st and send us the final version after that. But you do need to have a continuous improvement plan sent to us and posted on your website by October 1st. The current language in the statute requires both. So please make sure that you do both. We also ask that when you send your CIP in, that you send it specifically to the plans email and not to Nick or I. It's a lot easier for it to get lost in our inbox, whereas the plans email address is literally just for communication related to the continuous improvement planning process. And then, of course, templates and support are available on our website. If we have time at the end of the webinar, I'll jump on there and show you a few things that you can find there. Another thing of note is that you are required to update your continuous improvement plan every year. However, if your narrative has not changed, if you have not changed your mission and vision, if you have not changed the way that you're involving the community in your continuous improvement planning process, then as long as you have a narrative that is fully compliant on file with our office, you do not need to update or even send in a new narrative. If you have questions about whether or not you qualify for what we call a narrative exemption, you can reach out to Nick and he knows exactly how to check for that and to let you know whether or not you qualify. Any questions so far on any of the just basics? Great, we'll keep going then. Nick, this one seems, did you pass it looks like that's out of order, or it got out of order at some point. We can come back to it though. If you go forward 2, there should be the narrative slide. There we go.
Okay, perfect. All right, so the narrative is part of 2 actual templates that we send you guys. And Allison brought up that you can find those templates on our website, which is true. I do want to say, and I actually didn't discuss this with Allison, but it is my understanding that even though we would prefer these templates and this narrative, you do have the ability to create your own like style, your own kind of format. So with that being said, I do check these. It is a little easier for me because I know exactly what to look for. And I will be explaining this as like somebody who just reviews it. You guys put in the data, you guys have all the information, but I'm just the one who's looking for that. And I'm kind of like checking the box that you have it. And that's just so you have that like kind of mental idea of like how, I see this. So I'm not judging anything. I'm just looking for the box and I'm seeing you got it. So yeah, and this one, the CIP narrative is super simple. Just, obviously name, superintendent, who actually turns in the contact here. But as far as mission and vision, a lot of districts already have their own mission and vision. They'll probably just copy and paste it in here. But I did want to say it does need to be clearly labeled. If you are going to do your own format with this, it is, it should be clearly labeled, it should be separate, and it should definitely be different. So mission and vision definitely have to be different from each other. If I can't find it, I may send it back and you might be like, I have it right here. And if it's not clearly labeled, I might just have missed it. So just those simple things of like mission, vision, bolded, everything underneath, unbolded, like I can see it, I can see they're different, they're separate, and then quick, easy for me to know that you have that. The community involvement in plan development, this basically really comes down to, I am looking through how do you gain input from your community. So if it's something like we meet with parents, like, okay, like we just need to know a little bit more like how. Some good examples of this would be our district strategic planning committee includes representatives of local businesses, parents, student teachers, board chairperson, superintendent, elementary and secondary principals that meet quarterly. And that kind of shows like, and then even what month. I would think I was looking at Boise's, Boise Independent District, and they had a chart that they put on there of when they meet based on like just what they do on each quarterly meeting. And that was just helpful because it was like, boom, I know when you guys meet, and it's very clear of who's involved, and you have gained input from your community, and we know who that community is. So it's really just about being as transparent as possible about how you gain input from your community. But yeah, this one is a super simple template that we have. The actual template that you print off or that you'll see has a bunch of just instructions in the beginning, and then it comes to this part, and this part is really what I'm looking at. And the first part is to help you out if you have any questions. Obviously, I'll help you if you need it, but this is kind of like the main part, and you'll even see it's says required. And that's another thing I'll say is these next templates, like this template and the metrics template, they are meant to be as simple and transparent as possible. So we're not trying to trick you guys or anything. It's really supposed to be as simple as possible. Just sometimes that just helps, hearing that. So, but this, yeah, the CIP narrative, this has been around forever, 2018-19. Any questions about this? Okay, I did not see any questions. Okay, so now this will be the second template that is part of the CIP. The CIP metrics here, sections 1 and 2. So sections 1 and 2, you'll see, maybe you can see my cursor here, they have performance targets for previous year and then the upcoming year. So what you'll know about this template is that we're not looking for any data results that you guys have. Now in your 2023-24 performance targets, you probably will need your data research to figure out how you want to measure your targets. But sections 1 and 2, we're just looking for targets. So most districts will have their 2022-23 from their previous CIP that they turned in, and they'll just plug it in right in this column here. And I did want to kind of go over a little bit. Anything in blue has to be anything highlighted. It says blue shaded up here. Anything highlighted in the next sections, they're all required. The biggest issue that we have coming up when we review these is that sometimes some things are just left blank. As you can see, the two rows in this column here that are not highlighted, those are optional. Allison, help me out if I forget all of it, but basically the 5-year cohort graduation rate, when there are students who are part of the 4-year cohort, do not graduate, those students who do not will just be determined as like ineligible graduates, or I don't know the exact word, but then they won't get put into the next cohort. They end up just being a data percentage that doesn't get accounted for. So having this 5-year cohort graduation rate just kind of helps let us know who did end up graduating from that cohort of the previous year. And that's why it has 2021 cohort and then the target measure. So yeah, Allison, I don't know if I completely covered that, but it is an optional metric. And yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one really quick. It is a tricky one. A lot of people don't fully understand the 5-year cohort graduation rate. So just to fully clarify, it is the exact same cohort as the 4-year graduation rate cohort that was the year prior. So it just gives that cohort an additional year to complete. And then we look at what the percentage is for the 5-year cohort. The reason we went ahead and put it onto the template and made it an optional was because the state is using the 5-year cohort more. We're reporting it more. And so we knew that some of you want to create 5-year cohort goals. So that was the reason we included it here. Just as a sort of separate note, you are allowed to add additional metrics to the CIP. So what we keep on the template is really pretty much just what's required, with really only a couple of exceptions of metrics that we see a lot that people still want. But beyond that, we really just do the requirements. But you are allowed to add things if you have additional things that your district wants to measure as a part of your CIP every year.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So, and then this next optional metric here, the percent of students who meet the college ready benchmark on the college entrance exam. What I understand is it became optional because the SAT was originally mandatory and now it's not. And some districts will actually still record that result or of who's taking the SAT, and some don't, just because it's not required anymore. So if you still have it, that's why we have it as optional, so that we can still see that. But all these other rows in this column that are highlighted are mandatory. And the biggest ones we see that actually just get skipped over are these adequate growth measures. And I'm going to let Allison jump in and explain what that is one more time.
Yeah, this one again is another sort of tricky one, and it's probably one of the most common questions that we get while you all are working on your CIPs is what the heck is adequate growth and where do we find that data? So what adequate growth is it's the growth indicator within our accountability system. And the growth indicator is looking at the percentage of students who hit their growth target. And their growth target is calculated as a part of a 3-year trajectory. So we look at how did they perform between 2 years? And then if they continue to perform that way, would they meet proficiency 3 years in 3 years? And if not, they didn't meet their target. If they're on track, if they're moving in the right direction, and if they stayed in that same growth trajectory that they would meet growth in 3 years, then they are considered having met their target. And so this is really looking at the percentage of students in your district, not school, although in the case of charter schools, your district could be your school, and looking at specific grades. The data for this can be a little bit tricky to access, especially if you are a smaller district. So hopefully there will be some spare time at the end where I'll be able to just jump on our website and on the State Department's website and show you some places where you can get data. And then I'll also give a little bit of additional information about ways that you can gather data.
Awesome. Thank you, Allison. And just going off of, you said like possibly not having these. Sometimes people will put like an NA. It is actually more beneficial to put either a not applicable or a not available. So if you are a district that is only has K-8 schools, you might just put it's not applicable because you don't have for 4-year cohort graduation rate, because you don't have those students in your district. So that would be like a not applicable. Now, if like for whatever reason, maybe you're a new school or a new district that doesn't have previous targets, then you would put just not available, because you would have that for a new performance target over here on on the 2023-24 target. So that it helps us a little bit navigate exactly what you guys are reporting, if it's not applicable or not available. An NA would be better than just not putting anything, I would say. If you don't put anything, it looks like maybe you just missed it. We do have a note section 6 we'll get to. So all those, if there's ever anything where you're like, you don't have the data, you don't have the target measures, and you're not, maybe you're not even sure why, it's best to probably reach out to us, but even just put a note in there. Even if you're just like, I'm not really sure, putting a note, and we'll get to section 6, or even making your own section down here, but that is helpful. Okay, do we have any questions before we move on to section 3 and 4?
I also do just want to note, in terms of that not applicable, we see NA sometimes when it isn't, when that's not accurate, when it is applicable to you. So we'll see districts or charters who serve a given grade put NA in, and it's mostly just like, even in the 23-24 column, right? So like, oh, well, we don't know what to do for that, so we're going to put NA, or for some reason we don't think it applies to us. If you serve that grade, you're required to create a metric for 23-24, even if the people before you didn't create a metric in 22-23. You're still required to create a performance target, a goal for 23-24 for any metric for which you have grades in your district or charter school that apply to that metric.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, let's see. Okay, so same template, section 3 and 4. So these section 3 and 4, when I discuss them, they're generally the same. They're just talking about different measures. So section 3 talks about literacy, and then section 4 talks about progress towards college and career advising and mentoring goals. But as far as when, like, how to complete these, they're very similar. So in section 3, you're going to want to create your own measure towards progress. Yours is your LEA's progress towards your literacy goals and targets. So they have to be different than section 2. And I'll go back real quick. So you see section 2, literacy proficiency, and then section 3, how the LEA measures towards literacy goals. So looks a little bit similar. So sometimes what will happen is an LEA will put a metric that is identical to section 2, and that's kind of the biggest issue we see. And what we want to do is have the LEA put their own metric on how they measure their progress towards literacy and goals. And I guess a little bit before I give like an example on that, is this is sections 3 and 4. You'll see you have your 2023 22-23 performance targets, as well as 23-24, just like sections 1 and 2. These sections are the ones that we're actually now requiring results of the 22-23 sections column here. So and that is if available, but most likely they are. And then you'll see that section 3 has an A and a B. I just want to make it clear that although they are the same, one is only one is required. So section A is more numerical and written up here, and generally pretty simple for LEAs who have done it and have already completed the CIP in the past, because they can take the data and research that they've done in the 22-23 CIP and plug it in and continue following that progress. Whereas sometimes maybe new districts or new individuals in their LEA who are completing this might have be finding out how they want to measure this. They can write a narrative. That is fine. Most LEAs don't, but that's totally okay if you do. The biggest thing is we just need to make sure there's a numerical metric and a numerical target in your narrative. I guess an example of just a section 3 metric would be like, I guess, all K-3 students who scored below proficient on the fall IRI will gain at least one performance category on the spring IRI. So that's a metric that we see a lot of districts use. And it says at least one, which is totally fine if you put in one. I've noticed that it does help to have a few in there when we do look at this, because we are looking for at least one. So the biggest thing when when we're looking at these things is just that it's not the exact same thing as a section 2 metric. And if you need any help on figuring out maybe what is used or other examples, you can reach out to us, but that is our biggest thing. So same with section 4. We just want to make sure that they are a new metric with a numerical metric and a numerical targets. Let's see.
And just to add to that, I would say also the performance metric description does need to be specific enough that you can answer yes or no easily. We have seen sometimes in the past that folks will just put, just as an example, professional development. But then as a person reviewing it, I would send it back to you and say, that's not enough, because what professional development are you measuring? If it said, teachers will participate in at least one literacy focused professional development event, and then had a percentage goal for the percent of teachers that you want to have do that, that would be an appropriate metric. But just professional development, we don't know what you're measuring, which means you would have a difficult time answering whether or not you met your goal. So just make sure also that when you're writing these, that they're specific enough for an outsider to be able to read it and know what you're measuring.
True. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's really just about being transparent. So yeah, another example for section 4. I mean, a lot of times we'll see just like graduation, or yeah, once again, like just development. A good example that we do see is like percentage of high school seniors. So it's specific to seniors that apply to at least one post-secondary institution. So it's like just very clear on what you're measuring. So somebody who, just a normal citizen can understand exactly what they're reading. But yeah, any questions on this, on sections 3 and 4? Okay, I'll move on to section 5. Section 5 is basically like a reflection or review of the targets of sections 1 through 4, written out in a narrative of basically 3 things. You want to discuss your successes, and it's all up here too. Successes, your challenges, and how you are going to address those challenges or build on your successes. So when I review these, once again, it's the only reason I send this back is if it just doesn't answer those 3 things, or because it has maybe one sentence in there, just word, I don't even know, like a bad example, but there's just not enough information to satisfy the success, the challenges, and how you're going to overcome those challenges or address them or build on successes. I don't necessarily look for numerical evidence, but it does help if you have it. I just need to see those 3 things. And if I see those 3 things, then you're good. And this, yeah, I think, is there anything else, Allison, on section 5?
Yeah, so I would just say two additional things. I agree with Nick that a common issue with this is folks just sort of not giving enough information. We don't expect you to cover every single one of the metrics from 22-23 and whether or not you met those metrics. We don't expect to see all of them. Highlight successes, highlight particular areas of challenge. It doesn't have to be really long, but it should be at least 2-3 sentences long. Feel free to use bullet points. Bullet points are great here. The number one mistake that we see related to this section is people just skipping it, leaving it completely blank. That is the most common reason for districts and charters to not be compliant on it here, is that somebody just didn't think they had to do it. And it is a required section. It is in statute that it's required. So we can't give you a pass on this one. We got to send it back and say you have to put something in here. So please, that we actually boxed it out in blue this year to try and help draw your attention to, like, no, this is still a required part of the report. So please do make sure to put something in there. And if you have questions about what we're looking for, feel free to reach out.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. And then once again, I think I mentioned section 6 here for notes. This is for any section you want to make a note on. This definitely is encouraged, especially for districts that put in not applicable or just NA or don't put anything into a certain row or column. Explaining why is super helpful for us, so we know exactly where you're coming from, and we know, oh, I guess they're a K-8 district. I didn't realize that, or something. So it just helps us out instead of sending it back and you guys saying, oh no, we're K-8 or we're just not applicable to us. If it's in the notes, we don't have to do that. Kind of saves everybody time, but it's really just for you to kind of explain anything that you might even feel is just not being represented in what we've given you and in the platform. So please use it as much as you can. It helps us out a lot. And it can be used for any section of the CIP, even section 7, which Allison will go over once we're done with this line. Does anybody have any questions? No question. Okay.
So we're wrapping up metrics and about ready to go over to the staff performance section, which is also a part of the metrics document, but it is a separate tab. Here is the staff performance report. Folks probably remember that this is one of the newest requirements in the CIP. And I'll be really honest that it's one of the more challenging areas and one of the areas that we continue to see that districts and charters kind of struggle with. So one of the first things that's really important to note, in order to report data in here, you must be able to group your teachers, staff, so that can include pupil personnel. This is not just teachers, okay? Instructional and pupil personnel staff should be included in here per the statute. You have to be able to group those staff into groups of 5 or more educators that have a common assessment tool. And we'll talk in just a minute about sort of what I mean by that. If you do not have any groups of 5 or more that use the same assessment tool, then you have a couple different ways that you can address how that is done. The preferred way is actually here in the instructions, and it's also in this instructions tab in the CIP, because we're really trying to direct people to this, because it's a little bit easier for both our staff and for the public to look at and understand why you're not providing full data here. And that is, if you'll see up in the instructions part of this, it says in the second sentence, if you did not set a target, right, put not available, then provide the results, provided the group is 5 or more, and then fill in the rest. If the situation is that you have a group, but the group is not 5 or more, then what you can do, if you really think about it, is how much can you fill out? So you could still give, this is grades K through 3, and the subject is everything, because it's all the K through 3 teachers. So we put K through 3 teachers, subjects, everything. Their assessment tool is the IRI, right? The performance target we set for them last year, if we gave one, put that in there. If you didn't give one, you put not available. Then under 22-23 results, as you see right up here, if your teacher staff group is fewer than 5, please enter N size in the 22-23 results column. So that's in that first important note. So you can still put the group in, you can still set a 23-24 performance target for them. You just can't provide their results. And the reason is because of data security. So just in that 22-23 results column, you would put N size. And then we would know, okay, that is a group that's less than 5. And then you would do that for your other groups. If you don't have any groups that are 5 or more, and you don't want to go through that process, we will give you a pass if you use the section 6 notes, and you write in the section 6 notes, we do not have any instructional or pupil personnel staff groups of 5 or more that use the same assessment tool. So we are unable to provide staff performance report data. If you put that kind of a statement in the section 6 notes in the other tab, then we'll count you as compliant in terms of staff performance. The most common issue that we run into is folks not doing either one of those, not either putting the groups in and just doing the N size in the 22-23 results column, or make a good comment over in section 6 notes, just leaving it blank. And then we send it back and we say it's blank, and then they email back and say, oh, well, we didn't have any results to give because of the N size. Just save us all the time and make sure to address that up front if that's your situation. For many of you, you might have some grades or groups where you do have data, and some where you are able to provide the data because the group is 5 or more, and some where you don't. The thing that I tell everyone in terms of the staff performance report is just do your best. Provide what you can, don't provide what you can't. So I want to talk through what it looks like to put a group in here, because it does feel a little complicated and sometimes a little bit difficult. So just work yourself through as best you can. So as I said before, an example might be K-3 literacy, but I want to use a different example that's like a middle school or high school group, because those can feel a little bit more complicated. So I might have a group of teachers who are all teaching. Maybe I'm a big enough district that I have all high school PE teachers, and I have 5 of them. I have 5 high school PE teachers. And so I would put in the grades for them, right? They'd be 9 through 12, or it can say high school, either one's fine with me. And then the subject would be PE. And then the performance metric for this is the percent of students taught by that group of staff who meet their measurable student achievement targets or success indicators on the assessment tool. In this case, maybe the assessment tool is the fitness test. Maybe that's what you use across the board, across all those grades. So then you'd put in national fitness test. And then you'd say your 22-23 performance target, if you had one. Maybe you didn't have a group of 5 teachers last year for PE, and maybe you had 4. And so you didn't create a target. And so you would put not available. Or if you had a target, you would put it in there. If your group has changed substantially, you might say group changed. So we're pretty flexible in terms of how we look at that 22-23 performance target data. Just, do your best in terms of the performance target. And then the next column over, 22-23 results, what you're really saying is, okay, what percentage of students taught by this staff did that? So this is a little tricky, because the assessment tool and the measurable student achievement targets are supposed to be what you are using for that staff member's evaluation, not something that you create just for the staff performance report. We also don't want you to adjust your staff evaluations just to make it easier to fill out this report. There's a whole section of statute on staff evaluations. I know you all know it. And we want you to be using that. And then, as best you can, fill out this data every year. What we don't want is you sort of making things up in here, or, like I said, totally shifting what you're doing with your staff just to meet the needs of this report. So just do your best. So you put in your 22-23 results. What sort of makes this tricky is when you're doing evaluations, what it would seem sort of natural to ask would be, what percentage of teachers met their target, their goal. But that's not what this is asking. This is saying, once you've grouped those teachers together, now what percentage of their students met the target? So you do, in terms of the 22-23 results, have to pull up the numbers and then average across teachers and put it in here. And I know that's a little tricky. So if you have questions, contact us and we can try to help you. There have been times when I've had literally like hours long sessions with individual districts just to sort of work this through. So if you're still struggling with this, or if you're new to CIPs and you need help, please reach out. The 23-24 performance targets should be, again, the percent of students taught by that group. What percentage of those students do you want to hit that target on that assessment tool when you're thinking about the full group taught by all of those teachers in that group? So questions. I see there's something in here. Should we use the same results qualification as is used for teacher evaluation? Yes, if as in, so students have been enrolled and attended 80% of interval of instruction. So yes, that would be the goal, right? Would be to say the assessment tool was, right, this, and then you can even type in there if you want that target, or, right, you're looking at what percentage of students were enrolled and attended 80% in the interval instruction for that particular goal that you just set. That's the goal for 5 or more teachers. Then you would group all their students together and ask that question. So it should be driven based on teacher evaluations. We know that you can set teacher evaluation, measurable student achievement targets or success indicators for teachers and pupil service personnel at an individual level. And we have districts, even mid-sized to large districts, who are doing that down to the individual level and may not have groups of 5 across the board. Or oftentimes what we see is you might have groups of 5 in K through 5, especially K through 3 because of the IRI, but then not have it in the upper grades because you don't have the ability to group people together in the secondary grades because their goals are more specific for their evaluation since they're teaching specific subjects and specific grades. So just do your best. Are there any other questions related to the staff performance report? I know this one is complicated and a little difficult to fill out and to work through. I will say that we saw a huge improvement last year in the number and percentage of districts and charters who were successful in doing this correctly. The first year that it came out, folks really struggled. Last year, it seemed to go a bit better for folks. So hopefully it will continue to feel a little easier. In addition to the instructions that are at the front, atop of each of these sections in our template, please also note that we have an instructions and examples tab in the template that gives very detailed walkthrough instructions, and then also has a fully completed example CIP that is there for you to view. We do ask that you do not enter your information in over top of that, and instead that you use the metrics and staff performance tab to enter your data. Okay, I don't think we have any more questions about that. So EVOS opportunities, I wanted to make sure folks know about EVOS as an additional tool for data. And then since we have a little bit of time, I will also jump over onto websites and show you places that you can get data to use for your CIP. The important thing to note about EVOS is the data is there to help you to learn about your district, to compare yourself to others, to compare yourself to the state. However, a very, very important note is that the EVOS growth data is using what is called a value-added growth model. That is not the same growth model as the trajectory growth model that we use for state accountability. So it is not the same growth metric as the one that we talked about earlier that on the CIP is called adequate growth. The EVOS data is not addressing that. So just know that that's a different way to look at growth that can help you to learn about your students and might help you in the process of setting goals, but it is different. So in terms of using EVOS, either to help inform your CIP or just general use, we have been working with our contractor to get some opportunities to really help folks to learn about the system better, what's in there, how can you use it, what can you see. So the first opportunity is going to be that they are going to be doing a presentation at the IASA conference on August 2nd at 3 p.m. So you can keep an eye out for that. You can attend that if you want to. There will also be a separate demo we're planning to sort of focus it on content, curriculum, and assessment staff. However, if there's a superintendent who chose to go to a different session at the IASA conference who wants to join in on August 30th, you are absolutely welcome to attend. Anyone can attend the August 30th demo, and that demo is just really going to be a separate demo. That's another sort of opportunity like this that you can sign up for and come and participate in, and that the contractor is going to operate. We will be sending out a flyer for that with some more details regarding how to sign up to all of our CIP contacts and anybody who's on the State Department's assessment contact list. So that those are a couple upcoming opportunities. So before we just sort of jump to the end, I want to make sure there are no other questions. And then if there are not, I will share screen and show you some websites. All right. Give me just a second to share screen. Okay, let me move the chat off that screen. So the first website that I want to show you, can everybody see it? Somebody give me a thumbs up, or I can see it in the chat. Are we good? Okay, good. So this is our website. And what I wanted to do is just walk you through from here, where do you go to get the CIP tools? Because there are more resources than just the templates. I want to just show you a few things really quick so that we make sure everybody knows where to find this. So if you're just on our website, which is boardofed.idaho.gov, important, not the State Department's website, the board's website for CIPs, okay? Once you're here, if you put your cursor over K-12 education, another toolbar drops down, and then you're going to click on district/charter school planning right here. And this page is pretty much devoted to CIPs, and then it also has some legacy information related to the literacy intervention plan and the college and career advising plan. Nick is not yet on here, but he will be. Our webmaster is just not available right now, so it's going to be a few days before we get his information up on here, but we will show that at the end of the webinar, and then quite soon we will be putting Nick up onto this page as well so that his contact information is here too. So up at the top, there's just sort of a general intro about CIPs, and then you'll see right below in pretty big letters, templates for required continuous improvement plans. And then here are the 2023-24 templates. You click on it, it will drop down. There are the two templates. And then other resources. And other resources includes a checklist and the CIP staff performance FAQ. So we had, especially in that first year, a lot of questions about the staff performance report section. So we created an FAQ for that, and we're keeping that up. It also is the academic growth indicator description. So this further describes that piece that we call adequate growth in the CIP. It walks you through what that indicator is and how it's calculated. And then right now, the 22-23 CIP webinar recording presentations up from last year, but very soon that will be replaced with today's webinar and slides. So that'll be up soon too. So those are the other resources. Then below that, we have the templates for other plans, the Literacy Intervention Program Plan and the College and Career Advising Plan. The Literacy Intervention Program Plan, an important note here is you are still required to have one. You're just not required to send it into the state. The metrics for literacy have all been pulled into the CIP. So we really don't need to have a metrics template anymore. So now it's just the narrative and the budget that are available. And we just update those every year in case folks are in the process of updating your plan. because you are supposed to keep it up to date at a local level. So if you're making substantial changes in terms of how you're providing literacy interventions to K-3 students, you should go in and update your literacy plan. So otherwise, you can keep using your previous one if you haven't made changes. The college and career advising and mentoring plan is now optional, but I know that there are still quite a few districts who want to keep one on file because of how you're spending that money. So we continue to provide that template as well. There are also related documents off to the side, including the Idaho Comprehensive Literacy Plan from 2020, and your literacy intervention program plan at the local level is required to be aligned to that. So if you haven't already done that alignment, or if you're unsure if it's aligned, you should take a look at that. So that is our website and the tools that are there. I also want to show you some things on the State Department website, which are going to answer at least one of the questions in the chat. And then we'll jump back over. So if you go to the State Department of Education's website, sde.idaho.gov, and you scroll down to the lovely buttons that are colored, and you click on Assessment and Accountability, and then you scroll down a little bit more, and you click on Data and Results. The main data and results that you are going to use is this section right here that says data underlying the report card. And the reason is because this includes all of the ISAT data and the IRI data that goes up onto our website, including by district and by grade, and by school and by grade. So all of that underlying data is here. And so you'll click on the X and you'll see what's available. Right now, what's available is the report card underlying data and the report card underlying enrollment data for 21-22. The 22-23 data is not yet up, but I'm going to show you the 21-22 data so you know what to look for when the 22-23 data is up. So if you click on this, and I'm not going to because I already did earlier so that you wouldn't have to watch me download it, you will get to here. And I want to show you, once you download the document, make sure down at the bottom, it'll start you on this data note. You then have to click the tab that says state districts and schools. And then I actually have this already filtered. Using the filters here is really important. So if I say select all, which is how it will start, it'll start like this. It'll start looking like this with the state of Idaho and all this data. But you can actually quite easily get to your data by using the filters. So Weiser has long been my example district in the CIP. I don't know why. They were randomly chosen years ago, and they still are. So that's why I chose Weiser. And the easiest way to get to Weiser School District is just under entity name. If you click on the filter, you can then search. And so if I search for Weiser, I can see that I can look at Weiser District, Weiser High School, or Weiser Middle School. And I really just want to look at their district. And then it's going to pull up Weiser District. Now, if I want to see the growth data, right, which seems to be the one that's hardest for folks to find, the achievement data is here too, right? So if I want to see achievement, I would go to the metric domain. I would say achievement. Achievement is proficiency, right? And so I would say achievement. I want to see achievement. And then I can choose grade range. So I can look at K through 12, or I can look at individual grades. In the case of Weiser, we only have K through 12 because their individual grades aren't large enough to show by grade because they were too small. And so they end size out. And so I'll talk about that in just a second, how you deal with that. If I want to look at the growth data for a given district, I go back over to that same spot. Instead of achievement, I'd say growth. And then what shows up in the growth is the percent of growth, okay, for the percent of ELA growth is the percent of students who met their target. And you can see here that there is another place where you can grab specific grades, and that is under subgroup. So I can actually go through and say, okay, I want to see Weiser's grade 6 growth. And then it will pull it up for me. And it also, you'll see the years that are available, both 21 and 22. And so that lets me take a look back and see how has my district done in that metric. So once the 22-23 report card data is released, it will look like this. I'm going to be really, really honest with you all and say that the underlying report card data does not often get posted prior to late October or early November. It has to be handed off to the vendor who manages the report cards by then. And so oftentimes it's not available till then, which is obviously after the October 1 deadline. Prior to the October 1 deadline, we always encourage and sort of push from our office to the department for them to try to get as much of the ISAT and IRA data as they can available on their website prior to October 1. We will again be asking them to do that. However, in any given year, it just depends on what sort of data craziness happens. Last year, there was a data issue related to some cut scores that delayed the release of that data until after October 1st. So when that data is available, the SD will let us know, and we will send an email out to all of you that says it's available. That is the publicly available data that goes up onto websites. There are two issues that could result in your district data not being in the data that is here on the State Department's website. First and foremost, you could be listed in there, but have none of the metrics that you need because of end size of your groups. If you're a small district, especially a very small district, things are not going to show up that you need because it's going to say end size. And then the other issue is just a delay that happens at the state level could just result in things not being up by October 1st. So the other place where you can get data is through your individual data portal, right? So the place that you already can go to look at your ISAT data, you already have the raw data. The difference between the raw data and the accountability data is that the accountability data takes continuously enrolled into account, which is part of the reason there's a delay between when the raw data is available and when the state's data is available, because we have to go through and identify students who are continuously enrolled and then do some data cleanup and make sure everything is accurate before we release it. However, you are welcome to use the raw data to help you to set goals. If you are not sure how to get a hold of the raw data, then the folks to reach out to are the State Department of Education's assessment staff, who will walk you through how to find that. You can reach out to Valerie Steffen, her contact information's here, or you'll see on the website here, you can go to right here and click staff, and it will show you the full staff for that division within the Department of Education. Ayaka Nikui, the director, is usually quite busy, but she's also very knowledgeable. So if you can't get a hold of someone else, you can always email her. But I suggest starting with Valerie or Beatrice and seeing if you can get an answer, because oftentimes they're very ready to answer these questions, because you're not the only one who has it, especially when folks are working on CIPs. So if you're not sure how to get to your raw data before the official state data is released, reach out to them and they will walk you through it. Any other questions about how or where to get data to help you in the process of creating your 23-24 school year goals or performance targets for the CIP? Okay. Any other questions in general for either Nick or I? Nick, will you pull our presentation back up so we can just put our contact information up there before we go?
Yeah,
Nick.
sure. Okay, did we have a question about?
We had a question about the EBOS at IASA. I think there was a note that they're not on the list. They aren't on the list on the website. They were a late addition, but my understanding is it's happening. I've double and triple checked. So my understanding is it is happening August 2nd at 3 p.m.
Okay,
And then there will be the second demo August 30th at 9 a.m. And we will send out more information about that.
All right, okay. So yeah, here's our information. Like Allison said, my information should be up on our website pretty soon. I am the administrative rules coordinator as well. I don't think I mentioned that. So yeah.
So if you have questions about administrative rules,
Well,
Nick
I
is
was
one of the
gonna
people
say,
you can contact.
yeah, of course you can if you need to. But if there's any questions on CIP or here until October 1st, please reach out.
And we will send out, once the webinar is recorded, we will send out a message letting you all know that it's posted up, so that if you need to go back and look at certain sections of the webinar, or if there's someone else who's going to be working on your CIP that you want to share it with, that you'll know that it's available. And throughout sort of the late summer and early fall, if there are additional resources that become available because we hear from you and you need something and we create it, we will reach out to you and let you know about that as well. All right, if there are no final questions, we'll just say thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording.